What's up, you guys? This is Devin from CenturyFX Studios, back with another video, and today we're going to be talking about something that it seems like every pro photographer says at some point in time, that you're not a real photographer if you don't shoot in manual mode. Now, this is really a petty, polarizing statement that is made by a lot of pro photographers, old head photographers, photographers who've been doing it a while, and specifically photographers who only or strictly or mainly just shoot in manual mode. But we need to really unwrap this and understand why people are saying this, where does it come from, and why people feel that way. Why do old head photographers and pro photographers feel that you're not a real photographer if you don't shoot in manual mode? And or there's some enthusiasts and some people who have already gotten onto manual mode who still adopt that same mentality. So let's get into it. Why do people feel this way, and why are we so polarized on this topic of manual mode? You got to understand that back in the day, mainly I'd say like 75 to 80% of photography's history has straight up been film. Every camera, I'm talking every camera, you talking film, you have to expose film, and film comes with a process, a very grueling process, especially if you go all the way far back in the film days. So with these cameras that need this process, photography was seen as something that was left to the professionals. You had to know exactly what you were doing with those chemicals. You had to know how to dodge and burn. You had to know how to process the film to the point where you were able to give it to a client. Matter of fact, something as big as corporate clients, wedding clients, all these people, maybe even the president, maybe even these higher class people that you don't even know what you're going to get straight out of the camera, and you have to process this and make sure it's competitive and it's as good as a professional product as your name says. All this stuff happens in the film world where you have to do this grueling, stressful process, and you bond with your camera. It's not just a stressful process. You bond with the art of photography. You start to have more respect for it, especially if you can't do it and you're a client and you're somebody who is trying to purchase this service from somebody else. Therein lies this whole respect for photography. The film process got a lot of respect from the film days because that was 80% of photography for the span of 100 and change years at this point, or 100 even more years. I'm not really thinking about it, but I mean, that's the scope of time that you're thinking about. Now, over the past 20 years in recent modern time, we've come up to digital photography, and that kind of really throws a monkey wrench into all the knowledge, all the pain, the strife, the hard work it took to go from these fully manual film cameras. In most cases, manual as we see manual today was pretty much a regular film camera. You had to know shutter speed, ISO, and exposure. So all these things you stressed out about from the film days is no more nowadays. Now we have digital photography, which comes to the knowledge portion that I'm about to talk about. Knowledge is very important because you have to understand the camera to make an exposure. Well, back then. But nowadays, you don't have to understand all that much about exposure, color, all this stuff, because you have this automated digital camera that does this camera does pretty much everything for you, from the exposure to almost everything except the focal distance and the composition and the ideal and creativity of the shot. Everything that's technical about the camera, it can pretty much do itself. If not, it can even help you when you're doing it wrong. And using these automatic modes like full auto, creative auto, program is sort of an automatic mode, and then semi-automatic modes, you have shutter priority, you have aperture priority, all these other modes that actually do stuff for you and adjust the camera for you, make it easy for you to not want to gain that knowledge of photography that those film photographers had back in the day. So now you're sitting around and you have these cameras that can do pretty much anything for you. What are you actually doing? What input did you put into that picture? What pain, strife, and stress did you go through? You didn't have to do any kind of pain, strife, and stress when it came to those chemicals back in the day, because now you have digital cameras. We're talking about the newer people who have just adopted photography. It doesn't have to be an old person. It doesn't have to be a young person. I'm just talking about the people who have just adopted photography and have strictly just used digital. You haven't had to use the chemicals. You hadn't had to do the process. And this includes me. I didn't start with film. I start with digital. So I haven't had to go through that entire process of taking a picture, looking at the back, or not even being able to look at the back of the camera, having to go through this process of exposing everything based off of my own knowledge and my own love and passion for photography. I didn't have to go through that process. I went through a process where I can take the picture and make adjustments, and I can continue making adjustments and practice and practice and practice and get immediate results. Now you can understand how all this new age stuff really makes the people who went through the old age of photography jealous and mad and angry, maybe even sometimes envious. There's a whole bunch of different emotions, because think about it. This new guy on the block, or this person who's just adopted photography, can now just take a picture when it took me, walk up and take a picture, delete it, take a picture, take thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of pictures, depending on what kind of cards you got and what size file you're using, and take all this stuff and gain knowledge and do all this stuff and make everything better for himself. And I had to go through all this stress, strife, and then you probably got poisoned from some of those toxins in the air that you're carrying in your body and stuff like that. So you had to go get damaged and stressed out from film photography. And this guy doesn't even want to use manual mode, doesn't even want to explore the camera to the fullest when the camera's trying to help him or her. It's just like, it gets so frustrated. So you could understand that. So today you got all this automated stuff, and the art of photography is now starting to dwindle. Why? Because you have new things like cell phones and Instagram and software and editing software on your phone that makes you do things, or allows you to do things so simple, so easy, that you don't even think about what you've done to actually achieve those things. For example, so Adams would go out and he would look at a spot for maybe sometimes even years, I think, and take pictures of that one spot just at the right time of day, right time of season, right focal distance, composition, and then he would dodge and burn it in post just the way he wanted to, and then he had a masterpiece. Now it's just like click, okay, I don't want this, click, oh, this is not this. A lot of people adopt that mentality of click, oh, I don't want this, that, and the other. I can just walk in there and let the camera do whatever I want it to do, and it's fine. I don't have to think about exposure. I don't have to think about foreground, background exposure, light ratios, or anything like this that the masters studied back in the day when film was pretty much 100% of the photography that you had. Now film is really not even a thing nowadays. A lot of people really have trouble getting their hands on film, if not processing it and going through that whole process, which is a lot more money than digital cameras nowadays. Cell phones have done something now to photography where it's weird. People love photography, love looking at images, and love looking at great images. People have never not loved photography, but they don't respect the art and the knowledge and the teachings of photography. And so when it comes to manual mode says to the photographers that are old heads and people who've used manual mode that the camera, you know exactly what it's going to do, you know exposure, you have respected the art, you have done your due diligence, and you have went through your battle scars to get the exposure and the image that you want. You didn't put anything on automatic mode and rely on everything from the camera. Cell phones cut all of that out. Cell phones don't even allow you to use ISO, and a lot of settings you're not even able to tune right. Now you can get the higher end cell phones, the pro cell phones, but you don't really have control over anything that the cell phone does. Now cell phones are great, the technology is great, and yes, I'd like to use my cell phones, but it does put you at a lack of knowledge for photography as a whole, especially if you're not using that cell phone in the pro mode that they give you. So those are some of the things to think about now that you know what this whole debate is about. Now moving forward, what are you missing as a photographer? So what makes you a real photographer? I feel like I became a real photographer when I took on the responsibilities of being a photographer. If somebody came up to me, I was able to give them the image that they want. If not, I was able to take the criticism and then go back and do practice, aperture mode, shutter priority mode, and then you have your ISO. You have to learn ISO, you have to learn exposure triangle, then you learn manual, and then you learn manual light ratios, and then you learn manual and different types of settings, outside, inside, high speed sync, and all this other stuff. Using manual to its fullest potential, not letting the camera choose what you want. That's when I knew I was a real photographer. That's when I knew. But This affects you. This affects you as a photographer if you don't know manual mode. You have to understand that manual mode is designed for you to strip the camera's ability to choose for you, and you control. And if you control, you can take all the possibilities that your camera can possibly do. Now, if you say, for example, you put it on autofocus, a full autofocus, the full range of the camera, all this other stuff, auto exposure, all auto, full auto. You could have did a polar opposite exposure based off of what the camera gave you. You could have not only blown the background out and got this new NDS modern look instead of having everything nicely exposed. You could have did a whole bunch of other stuff. You could do so much if you learn manual mode. So now that you know about manual mode, and chances are you probably don't use manual mode enough if you're watching this video or you just want to watch the video for the drama. So chances are if you're watching this video, you don't have enough manual mode experience. You want more manual mode experience. You've heard this phrase before and you're trying to wonder why people are so jaded and bitter or whatever emotion they're showing to you for. Manual mode is amazing. I use manual mode 95% of the time when that's just a rough guesstimate, but it's pretty much all the time when I'm actually shooting. So you have to understand what the benefits of manual mode is. Need to shoot manual mode, practice. In the immortal words of Allen Iverson, practice. We talking practice. I'm telling you, CenturyFX Studios, get into manual mode because I use it for pretty much I use it for every single setting that I'm in. And I haven't looked back.